I didn't realize how cheap my loyalty had become until the day the CEO congratulated me for making the company millions and laughed while telling me I wasn't ready to earn $1 more. That was the moment I understood the truth no one ever says out loud. Some workplaces don't reward dedication. They survive by draining it from people like me. I was sitting in the Monday morning all-hands meeting when everything changed. The conference room smelled like stale coffee and someone's overpriced perfume. And I was half listening to our CEO, Brandon, drone on about quarterly performance metrics when he suddenly stopped mid-sentence and smiled. "I want to recognize something special," he said, his voice taking on that rehearsed enthusiasm executives use when they're about to congratulate themselves. "Our young project manager here doubled our client revenue this quarter. $2.3 million in new contracts." Everyone turned to look at me, and for one incredible second, I thought this was it. The moment they'd finally see me, really see me. People started clapping, and I felt my face flush. Then Brandon looked straight at me, that patronizing smile still plastered on his face, and said, "But she's not ready for a raise yet. Experience is her reward right now. That's how we all grew, right?" The laughter that followed was polite, awkward, the kind people make when they're uncomfortable, but too cowardly to speak up. Mine wasn't laughter at all. It was something breaking inside my chest. I just delivered $2.3 million in contracts, and I was making $42,000 a year. Less than the new hire I'd personally trained last month. Less than my rent and student loans could reasonably accommodate. That was the exact moment something inside me cracked clean in half. 6 years earlier, I'd walked into Varelia Digital as an intern, with absolutely no background in tech or marketing. Just determination and a willingness to learn everything they threw at me. I was 22 years old, fresh out of college with a generic business degree and drowning in student debt. I stayed late every single night, learned every platform they used, memorized every client's preferences and quirks, taught myself their entire project management system from YouTube videos and trial and error. When other interns left after their 6 months, I stayed and begged for a junior position. When that junior position turned into 60-hour weeks with no overtime, I stayed because they told me I was investing in my future. They called me the heartbeat of the project floor in meetings, which I thought was a compliment until I realized it just meant I was the one keeping everything alive while they took credit and paychecks. But behind all those hollow compliments were invisible shackles I didn't recognize. Unpaid overtime that stretched into weekends, constant phone calls during vacations I rarely took, and endless favors for the company that were really just free labor dressed up as team spirit. Then one Thursday evening, just as I was packing up to leave at 7 p.m. after an 11-hour day, Cynthia, our chief operating officer, sent me a message that made my stomach drop. "Need you to cover a new campaign tonight. Client wants complete results and a full presentation deck by Monday morning. I know you can handle this." I worked that entire weekend on the campaign, barely sleeping, living on energy drinks and the leftover pizza I'd ordered Friday night and eaten cold for 3 meals straight. My apartment felt like a prison cell. Laptop glowing in the dark, spreadsheets blurring together, every muscle in my back screaming from sitting hunched over my kitchen table for 16 hours at a stretch. No overtime pay. No comp time. Not even a thank you text. Monday morning arrived and I dragged myself into the office at 8 a.m. with the completed presentation loaded on a USB drive, my eyes burning from exhaustion. By 9:30, Cynthia was presenting my deck to the executive team in the big conference room with the glass walls. I watched from my cubicle as they nodded and smiled, as Brandon leaned forward with interest. My name wasn't on a single slide. When the meeting ended, and I carefully, nervously mentioned this to Cynthia in the hallway, she smiled that thin, cold smile I'd come to recognize. "Team effort, Samantha. You're growing. This is how you develop thick skin and leadership presence. That phrase, "you're growing," became the leash they pulled tight whenever I asked for fairness, for recognition, for basic human respect. It meant, be grateful we let you work here at all. 2 weeks later, the client signed a $1.8 million renewal based entirely on my pitch, my strategy, my work. After the renewal was official and the contracts were signed, Brandon called me into his corner office with the expensive view and the leather furniture. "Samantha," he said warmly, like we were old friends, "we really appreciate your dedication. We'll definitely discuss a raise next quarter when we review everyone's performance." Then he handed me a $25 Amazon gift card as a thank you and a symbol of the company's gratitude. I forced my face into a smile, thanked him, and left before he could see the humiliation burning in my eyes. 3 months passed. Nothing. 6 months. Complete silence. 1 year later, they gave the promotion I'd been promised to a man named Derek, who I had personally trained, who called me for help on every single project, who'd been with the company for exactly 8 months. When I asked Cynthia about it, she said Derek brought a different energy to the role, and that I should focus on being a team player rather than climbing ladders. That night, I went home and cried in my car for 20 minutes before I could bring myself to walk into my apartment. But crying wasn't enough anymore. I decided to ask one more time, one final time, and if they said no, I'd know exactly what I needed to do. I scheduled a meeting with Cynthia on a Tuesday afternoon, my hands trembling as I walked to her office, but my voice carefully steady. "I need to talk about compensation," I said, sitting across from her expensive desk while she typed something on her phone without looking up. "I've been managing 3 major projects completely alone for over a year now. The HOA campaign, the medical client, the tech startup. I'm doing senior-level work." She finally glanced up, her expression somewhere between bored and mildly annoyed. "Samantha, experience is currency. You're richer than you think. Some people work decades to get the kind of exposure you're getting." I felt something shift inside me in that moment, a fundamental understanding that they would never, ever value me until I was gone, until I became the problem they couldn't solve rather than the solution they could exploit. That night, I sat on my couch in my quiet apartment, opened my laptop, and updated my LinkedIn profile with 3 simple words: open to work. 2 days later, while I was eating lunch at my desk and pretending to review campaign analytics, I got a direct message from a recruiter named Patricia. "Your portfolio is extremely impressive," the message read. "We have a senior project manager position at Novatech Solutions that I think would be perfect for you. $82,000 base salary plus full benefits, 4 weeks vacation, professional development budget. Would you be interested in discussing this?" I read the message 6 times, certain I'd misunderstood something, certain this had to be a scam or a mistake. $82,000, that was nearly double what Verelia paid me. For the first time in years, maybe the first time since I'd started working at Verelia, I felt something that wasn't exhaustion or resentment. I felt seen. I felt valued by someone who'd never even met me in person. I typed back immediately. "Yes, very interested. When can we talk?" The interview was scheduled for Friday morning at 10 a.m., and I spent every spare moment that week preparing, researching the company, rehearsing answers to common questions, imagining what it would feel like to work somewhere that actually paid people what they were worth. Thursday night at 6 p.m., exactly 16 hours before my interview, Cynthia accidentally scheduled a mandatory client call for 10 a.m. Friday morning, the exact time as my interview. I stared at the calendar invitation for a full minute, my jaw clenched, before I emailed Patricia and rescheduled the interview for noon during my lunch break. I could do this. I would make this work. But at 11 a.m. on Friday morning, just as I was mentally preparing to slip out for my interview, Cynthia appeared at my cubicle and dropped a thick folder on my desk with a sound like a judge's gavel. Need this deliverable completed and sent to the client by 1 p.m., she said, not quite looking at me. Critical deadline. Can't be missed. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled and said, of course. I skipped lunch entirely, working frantically, my fingers flying across the keyboard, my heart pounding with stress and rage. I hit send on the deliverable at 12:58, didn't even check it twice, and logged into my video interview at 12:59, sweaty and breathless and determined. The interview lasted 40 minutes. I nailed every question. 2 days later, on Sunday evening while I was trying to relax and failing completely, Patricia called me. Samantha, I have great news. They'd like to offer you the position. The offer letter arrived in my email Monday morning. $82,000 base salary, full health insurance with dental and vision, 4 weeks paid vacation, paid holidays including your birthday, a company car stipend, and a professional development budget of $3,000 per year. Everything Virelia had denied me for 6 straight years of loyalty and sacrifice. Summarized on one single page, offered freely, presented like it was normal to treat employees like human beings. When I read the salary number out loud to myself in my empty apartment, I almost started laughing. That hysterical kind of laughter that's actually closer to crying. This was what I was worth. This was what I should have been making all along. I signed the offer letter with a pen that felt like it weighed 100 pounds, my hand shaking slightly, and sent it back immediately before I could second-guess myself or let fear talk me out of it. Then I opened a blank Word document and typed 4 simple words at the top. Letter of resignation. Revenge doesn't always need fire and destruction. Sometimes it starts with ink on paper, and the quiet decision to stop letting people destroy you. Friday morning, I arrived at work early, printed my resignation letter on expensive paper I'd bought specifically for this purpose, and left it in a sealed envelope on Brandon's desk before anyone else arrived. By noon, I got a call from HR asking me to come upstairs immediately. The HR director, a woman named Patricia who I'd never actually spoken to before, sat across from me with a disappointed expression carefully arranged on her face. We're very disappointed. Samantha, you're part of the Virelia family. We thought you were happy here. I looked at her steadily and said, I found a better family. One that actually values me. She asked where I was going, her tone suggesting I owed them this information, that leaving without giving them a chance to counteroffer was somehow betraying them. I just smiled, a real smile this time, not the fake ones I'd been wearing for 6 years. You'll find out eventually, I said. The next day, a Saturday, my phone started buzzing with messages from coworkers. Chaos had erupted at Virelia, and I was sitting on my couch, in sweatpants, drinking coffee, and watching everything I'd built start to crumble. The HOA client I'd been managing for 3 years, a massive homeowners association network worth $3.5 million annually, heard about my resignation through their account contact. The board president, a sharp woman named Helen, who I'd worked with closely on dozens of projects, called my personal cell phone directly Sunday afternoon. Samantha? I just heard you're leaving Virelia. Is that true? Her voice was tight with concern. I confirmed it calmly, professionally. Yes, I've accepted a position elsewhere. My last day is in 2 weeks. There was a long pause. You're the only reason we stayed with Virelia, Helen said bluntly. Your team is incompetent. Cynthia doesn't return our calls. Brandon doesn't even know our account details. It was always you. Just you. Within 48 hours, the HOA board requested an emergency meeting with Virelia's executives to discuss concerns about project continuity and account management. On Tuesday morning, Brandon stormed into the project floor, his face red, his jaw clenched, and headed straight for my cubicle. What exactly did you tell them? He demanded, his voice loud enough that everyone in the surrounding cubicles stopped working and stared. I looked up from my computer calmly, my heart racing, but my face neutral. Nothing. They asked if I was staying with the company. I told them the truth. He slammed his fist on my desk hard enough to make my coffee cup jump. You're deliberately jeopardizing millions in contracts. This is sabotage. I stood up slowly, meeting his eyes directly for the first time in 6 years without looking away or backing down. No, Brandon, you did that. When you decided that loyalty was free, that experience was payment enough, that I should be grateful to be exploited. I didn't jeopardize anything. I just stopped protecting you from your own incompetence. His face went from red to purple. But before he could respond, my computer pinged with an email notification. The HOA client had just sent a formal notice. All active projects were paused pending resolution of their concerns about account management and project leadership continuity. The company spiraled into chaos over the next week like a ship taking on water. No one else knew the systems I'd built from scratch. The tracking spreadsheets, the client communication protocols, the project management workflows I'd created because Verellia was too cheap to buy proper software. Cynthia tried to step in and take over my accounts, but she didn't understand the software, didn't know the client's preferences, couldn't find half the files she needed. Deadlines started collapsing. Other clients started asking questions. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with panicked texts from former coworkers. Where did you save the Q3 reports? What's the password for the media account? How do you export the analytics? I ignored most of them. This wasn't my emergency anymore. On Thursday evening, just as I was cooking dinner in my apartment and feeling genuinely peaceful for the first time in years, my phone rang, Brandon's name on the screen. I let it ring 4 times before I answered. Samantha, let's be reasonable here, Brandon said, his voice trying for friendly, but landing somewhere around desperate. We clearly didn't handle your compensation appropriately. What would it take to keep you? Name your price. I stirred my pasta and considered my answer carefully. Everything you owe me for 6 years of unpaid overtime, and then double it. He laughed, but it was nervous. Uncertain. I can't justify that kind of expense to the board. Be realistic. I turned off the stove and sat down, my voice perfectly calm. Then you can't justify keeping your clients, Brandon, because they're not staying for Verellia. They were staying for me. And I'm gone. The line went quiet for several long seconds. Samantha, please, I hung up. 3 days later, on Monday morning, the HOA client formally canceled their contract renewal. $3.5 million. Gone. Just like that. Within a week, another major client followed, a medical supplies company I'd been managing for 2 years. Then a tech startup I'd landed personally. 2 projects totaling $4.1 million in annual revenue vanished overnight, and the rumors spread through the company's Slack channels like wildfire. Brandon sent out a company-wide email blaming unexpected market shifts and client budget constraints for the losses. Everyone knew the truth. People had watched me work 70-hour weeks. They'd seen Brandon take credit for my projects. They'd witnessed 6 years of exploitation. The empire built on unpaid loyalty, on treating people as disposable resources, was cracking down the middle, and everyone could see the fault lines clearly now. Meanwhile, my phone rang again. This time it was Patricia, my new boss at Novatech. Samantha, I know you're scheduled to start in 2 weeks, but any chance you could start earlier? We have a project that's absolutely perfect for you. My last day at Verellia was quiet in a way I hadn't expected. I cleaned out my cubicle methodically. Personal photos, the coffee mug I'd brought from home, the notepad where I'd tracked 6 years of broken promises. Coworkers stopped by throughout the day, hugging me, whispering so management wouldn't hear, "You're doing the right thing." I wish I had your courage. You're my hero. Cynthia walked past my cubicle 3 times without saying a word, without even looking at me, her face rigid with something that might have been anger or shame or both. At 4 p.m., I handed my badge to the security desk, walked out through the glass doors into the afternoon sunlight, and felt 6 years of silence and swallowed words and invisible labor finally lift off my shoulders. The next week, while I was settling into my new office at Novatech and trying to believe this was real, Verellia lost another key account. The tech startup I'd personally brought in during my second year. The company that had once seemed invincible was bleeding clients, and everyone knew exactly why. Novatech felt like stepping into an alternate universe where normal workplace rules actually applied. People said good morning and meant it. Meetings started and ended on time. When I stayed late to finish a project, my boss noticed and told me to take a comp day. My new team actually listened when I talked in meetings, wrote down my suggestions, implemented my ideas, and, this was the shocking part, credited me by name when presenting to executives. My first paycheck arrived, and I sat in my car in the parking garage and cried while looking at the direct deposit notification. $82,000 divided by 26 pay periods. This was what respect looked like in numerical form. This was what my work had always been worth. 2 months into my new job, I got a LinkedIn message from Taylor, one of my former teammates at Verellia. "Hey Samantha, half the project floor wants to quit. Everyone's drowning since you left. Are there any openings at Novatech?" I forwarded Taylor's resume to HR that same day, along with 2 other former colleagues who'd reached out. Within 6 weeks, 3 of the best people I'd worked with at Verellia had joined Novatech's team, each one with similar stories about increased workloads, broken promises, and the same exhausting exploitation I'd finally escaped. The Verellia exodus had begun, and I wasn't even trying to recruit people. They were running toward the exit I'd shown them was possible. Then one evening in late November, while I was finishing up a project proposal, my personal phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Hello? Samantha." Cynthia's voice, tight and strained. "I need to ask you something. We're having serious problems with client data transfers and system migrations," Cynthia said without preamble, without small talk, without any of the fake pleasantries she used to use. "The clients you managed have specific file structures and protocols. We need your help understanding the systems you built." I leaned back in my ergonomic office chair, another thing Novatech had provided without me having to beg, and smiled even though she couldn't see it. "I'm sorry, Cynthia. My experience is too valuable to give away for free. You taught me that." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Samantha, please. I hope you find someone who's still in their growing phase," I said calmly. "Someone who's rich in experience, even if they can't pay their bills. Good luck." And I hung up, using her favorite excuse against her, like a weapon she'd sharpened herself. 2 days later, another email arrived. This one was marked urgent in the subject line, sent to what looked like the entire Verellia staff list. My finger hovered over the delete button, but I opened it instead. The email was from Brandon, formal and brief. "Effective immediately, Verellia Digital Marketing will cease operations. All employees will receive 2 weeks severance and information about Cobra Insurance continuation. We appreciate your dedication during this difficult transition." I stared at the screen in my quiet apartment, reading the words 3 times to make sure I understood correctly. 6 years of my life, the late nights, the weekend campaigns, the sacrifices, the exploitation, gone in one corporate email with passive voice and generic sympathy. The company that had consumed my 20s had collapsed completely, and I felt absolutely nothing. No satisfaction, no regret, just a strange, hollow emptiness. Then, slowly, I smiled. Because sometimes collapse isn't tragedy. Sometimes it's just gravity finally working correctly. Sometimes it's justice wearing a different face. 1 week later, another email arrived in my Novatech inbox. This one from a name I recognized immediately. Helen, the HOA board president. "Dear Samantha," the email began. Given the dissolution of Varelia Digital, our board would like to discuss the possibility of working with Novatech Solutions, but only if you would be willing to lead our account personally. We trust you, not the company name on the contract. Please let me know if this is something you'd consider. I sat back and laughed out loud in my office, and my colleague in the next cubicle poked her head around the partition to ask if I was okay. I'm perfect, I told her honestly. The irony was almost too beautiful. The same $3.5 million client that Brandon had lost that had started Varelia's collapse was now mine again. But this time with proper compensation, proper respect, and proper credit. I forwarded Helen's email to my boss with a brief note. I believe I can handle this account. 3 days later, my boss called me into her office and offered me a promotion to senior project manager with a $15,000 raise. You've proven yourself invaluable, she said simply, like that was a normal thing to say to an employee. Late one night, a few months later, unable to sleep, I pulled out an old journal I'd kept during my years at Varelia. Pages and pages filled with frantic overtime notes, burnout rants, anxiety spirals, and desperate self-doubt, written in tiny handwriting during lunch breaks and midnight campaign sessions. Why am I never enough? I'd written on one page. Worked 80 hours this week. No acknowledgement. Maybe I'm just not as talented as I think I am. Every line screamed with how desperately hard I'd tried to be enough, to earn their approval, to deserve basic respect. And reading those words now from the other side of everything, I realized something fundamental. I had always been enough. More than enough. They were the ones who were insufficient. Insufficient leaders, insufficient humans, insufficient in every way that mattered. They couldn't see my value because they were too busy extracting it. I closed the journal carefully, walked to my kitchen, and put it in the recycling bin. I didn't need to carry that pain anymore. 6 months after Varelia's collapse, I attended a marketing industry conference downtown. The kind of professional networking event I'd never had time to attend when I was drowning in unpaid work. I was standing by the refreshment table, talking to another project manager about client retention strategies, when I saw him, Brandon, standing alone near the exit, looking smaller somehow, grayer, diminished. He was consulting now, according to the name tag he wore. Freelance, no company affiliation, probably charging a fraction of what he used to make. He saw me and visibly flinched. For several long minutes he pretended to be very interested in his phone, but eventually he walked over, his expression somewhere between ashamed and defiant. "Samantha." He nodded stiffly. "I heard you're doing well." "I am," I said simply, not offering anything more. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "Look, What happened at Varelia wasn't entirely." He stopped, seemed to reconsider. "You were right. About everything." I looked at him for a long moment. This man who'd stolen my credit and dismissed my worth for 6 years and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no triumph. Just a distant, clinical recognition of cause and effect. "I know," I said quietly. Then I walked away without looking back, leaving him standing alone by the exit. At Novatech's annual awards ceremony that December, held at an upscale hotel with the kind of budget Varelia would never have spent on employees, I won Project Manager of the Year. When they called my name, my entire team stood up and cheered, genuinely happy for me in a way I'd never experienced before. I walked to the podium, accepted the Crystal Award, that probably cost more than that $25 Amazon gift card, and gave a speech I'd been mentally composing for months. "I want to thank everyone who believed in me," I said, my voice steady and clear. "But I also want to thank the people who didn't, the people who underestimated me, who exploited me, who told me I wasn't ready, who said experience was its own reward. Because without their betrayal, I might still be stuck proving my worth to people who never deserved my loyalty in the first place." The room went completely quiet. Then someone started clapping, and it spread until everyone was standing. The next morning, my speech went viral on LinkedIn. Within a week, it had 30,000 shares and hundreds of comments from people sharing their own stories. My inbox flooded with messages from burned-out workers, people trapped in their own versions of Virilia, all saying variations of the same thing. This is my story. You gave me courage. I'm ready to leave my toxic job. I responded to as many as I could, and I told each person the same essential truth. Loyalty isn't noble if it only benefits the person exploiting you. Walking away isn't quitting, it's refusing to participate in your own diminishment. Some people thanked me and stayed in their jobs anyway, too afraid or too trapped by circumstances I couldn't judge. But others sent me updates months later. I got a new job. I asked for a raise and got it. I finally stood up for myself. Sometimes walking away is the revolution. Sometimes refusing to accept less is the most radical thing you can do. One night, scrolling through old photos on my phone, I found one from my first week at Virilia. Me standing in front of the company logo, smiling with genuine hope and excitement, ready to build something meaningful. 6 years ago, I'd picked up a metaphorical hammer and started building with everything I had. I thought I was building Virilia's empire, constructing their success with my unpaid overtime and sacrificed weekends and swallowed dignity. But I'd been wrong about what I was building. I wasn't building their empire at all. I was building myself. My skills, my resilience, my understanding of my own worth, my capacity to recognize exploitation and walk away from it. Now I build different things. Peace instead of panic, boundaries instead of excuses, self-respect instead of desperate approval seeking. And every metaphorical swing of that hammer reminds me of the truth I learned the hard way. If you don't value yourself, someone else will. And they'll value you at exactly less than you deserve because that's what benefits them most. The final lesson took 6 years to learn, but it was worth every difficult moment. I didn't burn the bridge behind me. I didn't need to. I just stopped maintaining it. Stopped doing the unpaid labor of holding it together and let it collapse under its own weight. Some structures were never meant to stand. They were only standing because people like me were holding them up for free. And the moment we stop, the moment we walk away and let gravity do its work, everything built on exploitation falls exactly as it should.